This episode is brought to you by Backwards Planning Financial. Start planning for your death before you're gone.
In modern times, America has developed a squeamishness about our own national identity, an irrational fear of speaking directly when it comes to our heritage and history, especially anything that has to do with the simple reality that America was founded and settled by white Anglos. In response, a phrase has emerged that has captured the attention of patriots and haters alike: Heritage American. In this episode, we sat down with friend of the show, CJay Engel, the man who popularized the phrase, to discuss what a Heritage American is and why it matters. The King's Hall podcast exists to make self-ruled men who rule well and win the world.
Well, welcome to this episode of the King's Hall podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Kahn, joined today by Brian Sauvé.
Hey, it's good to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me.
The mountains are magnets, and Brian's like a penguin.
That penguin is the steel.
Yeah, that penguin's a steel.
Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of men of steel, we're joined today by a special guest, Mr. CJay Engel, the man of steel.
Thanks for not saying, speaking of penguins.
Speaking of diminutive, adorable creatures, CJay Engel, welcome to the show.
Engel. Brave and courageous,
We would never
like
do
the
that.
penguin. CJay, it is good to have you here.
It is.
We're going to be talking about Heritage America, and it's been a subject I think that a lot of people have talked about. It's been even in the news. People are starting to talk about this. So we're going to unpack that. But first, Brian, we want to let our listeners know we have a little thing called a golf scramble coming up.
Yeah, we do. Less importantly, there's a whole conference.
Yeah.
But much more importantly, there is a 4-man golf scramble competition that's you can sign up to participate in on Thursday morning, June 11th.
Do you have to be a Heritage American to sign up?
That's a good question.
Well,
What
first,
is a Heritage
we
American?
gotta define it.
We're going to have to figure out.
Yeah,
Before I can answer that, we're going to have to figure out what a Heritage American is. And for that, actually, CJay gave me permission. We're going to put his phone number, and you can text him a picture of yourself, and he will text you back Y or N. And that's what it is. It's just yes or no Heritage American. And he'll do that for you free of charge.
What a guy.
Yeah, really, really generous of him to offer to do that completely himself and not me making that up right now. But golf tournament.
Yeah, golf. We're going to win. I make this plug every show. I know that Scotty Scheffler is listening. Mm-hmm. But Scotty, you need us on your team.
Yeah, I'm willing to kick anybody off the team. Let's be honest, I'm the one who's going to get kicked off the team if Scotty joins. No, Scotty could carry me.
He could carry us.
He could carry us. Yeah.
So that's going to be a lot of fun. Conference. Be sure to go to the website. You can sign up.
Yeah, thewarfornormal.com.
Yeah, War for Normal.
Get tickets. In all seriousness, join us in Ogden. It's going to be so much fun. We have a great time at our conferences. This year, more than ever, we have tried to devote as much time as possible, not just to talks, which are great, but also to hanging out, being friends. The whole Thursday is just going to be various fisticuffs and other sundry events. So,
speaking of sundry events, Brian, Backwards Planning Financial.
Yeah, that's true. Headline sponsor of this episode. And known our guy, Backward Planning Financial. Great. If you're looking to get some financial planning in your life, and you should, let's be honest, most of you need to be posting a lot less about niche right-wing Heritage America stuff and like getting life insurance and like investing some money so that you're not destitute.
Joe Garrissey can
and
help
dependent
you out.
upon welfare. And Joe can help you with that. Our guy, Joe, at Backwards Planning Financial. So
Joe's our guy.
Thank you to Joe. And of course, all of our sponsors are great Christian family businesses, and we love them. So check them out, and you support us when you support them. So definitely.
This is Dave. Dave is dead. When he wasn't, he was a successful businessman with a rather large estate. This is Ben. As Dave's son, Ben has just inherited a logistical nightmare. Dave wasn't exactly organized with his estate. Sorting through folders, receipts, and records, a hunting lodge in Montana, a 401k, lots of investments, several bank accounts, and of course, taxes. Ben was overwhelmed. Enter Joe Garrissey of Backwards Planning Financial. When Ben called Joe and explained everything, Joe replied,
"No problem. That's easy."
And somehow it was. With Joe's guidance, Ben was able to put a robust financial plan in place which helped mitigate risk and bring order to the chaos, while building wealth, organizing his estate, easing the tax burdens, and cutting unnecessary costs. He helped Ben do something Dave never did: plan ahead. Starting at the end and working backwards, Ben now has a plan for his own family. Now his kids won't go through what he did when he eventually... Backwards Planning Financial. Start planning for your death before you're gone. You know, Brian, here at New Christendom Press, a lot of people ask us if they can replicate what we've been building. And when you think about it, there's a lot of moving parts to this business operation.
Yeah, that's really true, Eric. And I think people don't realize how many hands touch every single thing that we do. Like we've got a whole team just focused on working on YouTube, algorithm optimization with click-through rate, average view duration, optimized thumbnails, basically stuff I don't understand.
You know, honestly, Brian, I have no idea what you're even talking about right now.
No, it is pretty complicated. I know like we put so much work into every show, but then we actually have to fight just to make sure that people see it in the algorithm, which is why it's been so helpful to work with Trent from Creator Campfire.
And Brian, as I understand it, he's been working closely with the Haunted Cosmos team.
Yeah, he's been working really closely with that team. It's been super helpful. And I would definitely recommend him to anybody who's trying to grow their YouTube audience. He's a Christian and a real expert in this field. And if you want to connect with him, anybody can go to creatorcampfire.co/haunted and reach out.
Well, CJ, I want to jump into the conversation. First of all, just Heritage America. I guess the first question is, why is this an important piece of the conversation? As we're talking about things like immigration, why talk about this and why specifically this language?
Yeah, I think that the thing I'm trying to accomplish with this, and I'm not the one that coined the phrase, but I do say that I am the one that popularized it. There was an article in Politico about that. And so...
Really?
Yeah. If you didn't read it, you need to read it.
Wow, I missed that one.
That's great. We have a crisis of identity in the West, and I think that's kind of what's motivating this. Like we talk about immigration, a lot of people go into things like crime statistics and all of the welfare fraud and the SNAP fraud and all of that. And then we talk about whether our jobs are being given to these immigrants, and we talk about overcrowdedness and housing prices and all that. But I actually want to go to the deepest level possible and talk about what does it mean to be an American? Like, do we have a soul? Is there something that connects us to our fellow Americans in a way that immigrants can't relate with? And these are difficult conversations, but I think they have to be had, because I think that a crisis of identity is something that could liquidate an entire heritage and entire people. And so it's not just an American conversation, obviously in our context, that's where we're going, but the entire Western world is having to have these same conversations. That's what Restore Britain is about. All these other movements in Europe, they're having the same conversations. Who are we? What does it mean to be English? What does it mean to be French? We have to have the same conversations here. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I even saw this with the Olympics, which are still going on, I believe, the Winter Olympics.
As we record, yeah.
But people were asking these questions like, you know, you would have a lady who's like skiing for America, but she's like, she's from America, but she's skiing for China. And people are like, wait a minute.
She hasn't been to China in like her whole life.
Yeah, she like grew up in like near San Francisco or something like that. But you could just see at the national and in the global level, people want to have this conversation. What does it actually mean to be a part of a country? Because that definition seems to be changing.
It even seems like if you think about the way that modernity and advances in technology, everything from you can get places a lot quicker than you used to,
travel
to the internet. You can digitally be in places and share ideas very quickly and across spans that were impossible for most of human history. I think sometimes we forget that even something like the automobile, the way that it changed the mode of living, the suburbs, how you know our whole culture was shaped around those technologies. And these technologies have proven to have a delocalizing, homogenizing effect on everything, to where you could go almost anywhere in the world and everybody has the same rectangle and it looks exactly the same and it accesses all the same information, and they can curate wherever they are in the world their own kind of bespoke identity experience based upon some niche group or subculture that they have never physically even been in the presence of. So I think it's good and important, like you said, to know that these are actually really complex, difficult conversations to have, and they're not going to be solved with like a one sentence aphorism or, a centimeter deep kind of mode of thinking. You really have to wrestle with that ideology and reality.
Yeah.
What is the world like and how do we get here kind of question?
Yeah. And I think another thing to say too is like people assume, oh, you're just making this up. It's 2026. And so you are frustrated that you're, losing the things that you like. And so you're just making up these new categories. Mm-hmm. I would point out that like this conversation actually has happened since the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, there's a great book, I think it was in the 80s, by Sam Huntington called Who Are We? And he was really trying to understand what it meant to be an American. And he's not some right-wing activist. He was a Yale professor, very highly regarded, kind of a establishment liberal. And so he engaged in these same topics. And so anyone that wants to understand the ethos of an American can read these very mainstream books that were once very normal and they were part of the regular everyday academic conversation.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so difficult for people to talk about it today, the political discourse or otherwise, but to even broach these subjects? We've noted this in the show before that it there's a squeamishness about even talking about some sort of national identity. But why do you think that is?
I think a lot of what the project of the left relies on guilt manipulation. And so what they need is they need deracinated individuals. Like that's behind the transformation of marriage, the transformation of sex and sexual identity is behind everything. And so if anyone holds to something that roots him deeper than the current thing, then they don't have total control over him. And so I think that the left needs everybody to forget the past, to forget who they are, to think beyond just, I need to go consume product. And when that happens, communities form. When communities form, you actually have a bulwark against the administrative state. And the left needs the administrative state. And so I think that that's kind of part of it is there's been this guilt manipulation. And really it's funny because you mentioned the Olympics. And we all know that a Chinese person or a Korean or a Nigerian or anybody, we consider it normal that they would identify with their community, their heritage, their way of life, their religious roots, all of those things. And yet we've been so brainwashed in America, in the West, that when we think about it, we actually feel kind of dirty inside and we're made to feel dirty and we're losing our jobs and we're not allowed to be platformed on certain shows or whatever. So I think that the guilt manipulation is the primary driver and the fear. Like if I say the wrong thing, if I have an identity that transcends the current moment and what the administrative state and the activist left wants for me, I could be in deep trouble. I mean, I could be fired forever, all kinds of consequences, kicked out of churches, etc.
What is interesting, going back to the Olympics, because like the USA men's hockey team, they made waves because I think Quinn Hughes was the first American who was like, I love my country. But the rest of the American athletes were like, ice and what a terrible place to live. No other nation was doing that though.
No.
So there's this like suicidal hatred of self.
Sure. They were like, oh, Xi Jinping. Because if they did, they'd a red laser starts dancing. Oh, Xi Jinping, I love him so much. He, my favorite person. It wouldn't be the King's Hall without a good Asian accent.
No.
So you're welcome. This is for serious discourse here.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I want to ask particularly about this issue of identity. As you think about that, on the one hand, you have this whole terminology of the woke right, because it's like, well, but you're interested with identity too, just like the left is. But there's also been a phrase like all politics is identity politics. How would you start to parse that out?
Yeah, it's actually funny that that's a very controversial thing to say. But I would just go back to like the conservative wars in the 1990s. I mean, there was this massive standoff between Mel Bradford on one side and then the descendants of Leo Strauss on the other side. And Mel Bradford had just constantly emphasized the fact that like my politics is a matter of who I am and where I was born and raised. And so it's not this new thing. That's what identity is. That's like who you are. And like I represent not just myself, but I also represent my father and my grandfather and so on. And so that's actually who you are. And I think that our politics, the things that we fight for and stand for, should actually represent and honor those that came before. That's a biblical theme, that we should honor those that came before us. And that's identity. That's who we are. Now, you can idolize it, sure. And Christianity teaches us that we belong to the kingdom of God, which transcends these natural ordered affections. But nevertheless, these ordered affections, these natural affections are good and healthy and built in by God himself. And so identity politics doesn't have to be dirty. It can actually be the restatement of our classical Western and even American heritage.
It seems to me as well that when people say no identity politics, what they almost always mean is identity politics for me, but not for thee. Right. They're still advocating for some identity group that they're promoting. And actually the difference is that they would love and delight in nothing more than for their group to completely dominate, take over, destroy, replace, or integrate yours into theirs. So it's almost inescapable. How would you do politics without saying that you are trying to rightly govern some people in some place, in some group? Well, it's like, it just seems almost self-defeating to try to get away from it. But the left isn't stupid, right? They're using these things very intentionally.
I think you've talked about it before. It's sort of the thing where it's like, we wrote a rule into the game and it's, you can't win.
Yeah. Haven't you seen the rule book? It says like, you're not allowed to win.
Especially if you're like a white Christian male, like you have to lose.
Whoa. And it's funny how that worked. Like, you talked about how the guilt manipulation, that the left has been very successful at programming their opponents to adopt their frame and their frameworks and then manipulate them via those structures.
Yeah, there's a good example of this, and that's like using the Constitution, right? Like the left obviously has not cared for the Constitution for over 100 years.
Yeah.
But whenever you try to defend yourself, that's unconstitutional. And so it's like, that's exactly how it works. Like, so if you defend yourself as unconstitutional, but they're allowed to initiate the mass invasion of the West by facilitating hundreds of millions of people across Western European and American and Canadian and Australian and like all of these territories. And that's completely legitimate.
Yeah.
And so that's how they work. And they're smart. And the left is actually strategically brilliant. And look, maybe the right can learn some things from them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Another question I have is, if you think about the heritage American concept, a lot of people will say this is just a racial dog whistle. So first of all, do you think that's true? If not, why not?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to accomplish with this is I would consider it a slightly distinct conversation from like defining ethnic American. And I think that there's a place for that conversation, but that's not quite what I'm driving at with this. And I think the reason is because we are facing a literal situation of an invasion over the last, 20 years or so. And so the whole point of this conversation is not to get into the detail on that, but I do think that we should talk about the correlations between ethnic identity and the American ethnos or the American ethos. And so there is a conversation to be had there, but what I'm trying to at least get people to admit is that it is legitimate to say, I have roots here and I belong here. And these people that came in 5 years ago and they get to lecture me about who I am and the way of life that I'm supposed to lead, that's not okay. And so the very concept of heritage American is trying to make people recognize that they stand on the shoulders of giants. They have inherited something. They are the product of an actual people who experienced hardship and difficulties. They've produced all sorts of cultural artifacts like music and literature and myths and legends. Like when you say something like Johnny Appleseed or Paul Bunyan, that means something deep down in our soul because we're Americans. And I think that's what I'm trying to do is stop the deracination, stop the dehomogenization, or the separation of individuals from their group, and just recognize the fact that you come from somewhere and it's okay to recognize that you've inherited something worth preserving.
What on ethnic component, how would you factor that in then into sort of this concept?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that this is not new and made up. I mean, if you look at the immigration arguments in the early 20th century, especially in the 1920s with Calvin Coolidge, he was making the case for severe restrictions on immigration based on those who were most likely to assimilate into, and this is his phrase, not mine, Calvin Coolidge's phrase, the American race. And so when we say phrases like that, people can conjure up all kinds of scary and evil images, but just recognize that this rhetoric is part of our own history. And so there is an ethnic component to it. Now people will say, okay, so you want to go knock on everybody's door and, hold up the, the skin color chart. And it's like, well, no, that's not the purpose of having the conversation.
Yeah.
So the way that from Teddy Roosevelt to Coolidge, these people, these advocates of immigration restriction, they would say that America is a unique people. There was an ethnogenesis. And ethnogenesis have happened all over the place in the Western world. I mean, if you look at the English and the French and the German, these are combinations of earlier ethnic groups. And over time, through intermarriage and so forth, they became the English. And it was this conglomeration of these earlier groups. And what Teddy Roosevelt and others like Coolidge were saying was that just like that, the Americans went through their own ethnogenesis. And so you had Scandinavians and Germans and English and Scotch-Irish and all of these people that fortified themselves on the frontier and through their experiences on the North American continent, and they became a new people. And so that's how I would describe the core of what it means to be a heritage American, is to be a descendant of or connected to those settlers and pioneers and trailblazers that set up this country for the first time. People will say things like, well, you're not even a Native American. The Native Americans pre-existed the European settlers. And what I would point out is not a single one of those tribes or nations called themselves Americans. They had Cherokee and Cheyenne and Shawnee and all of these others, but the Americans was the product of a European experience here. And so American to them meant that new thing that took hundreds of years to grow into something that we can identify as a people, but we are the Native Americans. And people get that's a really fun thing on Twitter to do, is be like, yeah, of course I'm a Native American. What tribe? Anglo-Saxon.
Anglo-Saxon tribe.
But I think that's and people are like, you can't just redefine terms. Look back at the dictionaries of the 19th century, look at the letters. That phrase Native American was actually used to describe those whose descendants went back to the Pilgrims or to the founding generation and distinguished them from the newcomers from Central Europe, et cetera. So we are the Native Americans. That's who we are. That is our identity. Yep. And that's what we're trying to communicate.
How does this relate to, so there's Coolidge, even earlier views of American identity, of who this people is, who we are, right? How did the founding fathers, how did others think about this?
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny things about the founding fathers is they would have had no concept of having a discussion about whether someone can come from Europe and then be literally the same people as someone from, Asia or Africa or something. It wouldn't have made any sense to them. So they'll speak in terms like anybody can come here and we want more people to come here. But obviously there was a boundary on that, right? If you read the letters of Thomas Jefferson, it was very obvious that he was an Anglo-Saxon maximalist. And that was his conception. So at the very beginning in colonial America, they really saw themselves as derivative of English. It was very narrow. And of course, America at that time was the 13 colonies. It primarily existed on the eastern seaboard. And so they had no idea that America would be this entire continent of people. So there was a changing and developing meaning of America. And so what I like to say is there's different cutoffs for what a heritage American is. I think my favorite one is the Teddy Roosevelt's. And Teddy Roosevelt basically emphasized the fact that America continued to change. What it meant to be an American continued to change and develop until the frontier was closed. The frontier was closed at the 19th century, and then we had done it. We had conquered the continent. European settlers, heroes, legendary explorers had basically done what Europeans had done for thousands of years, and that's expand their civilization westward in all sorts of directions. And so that was the close. And so when you look at that picture, that's when he said, we are a new people, and we are the product of the combination of Scandinavians and English and all of these European peoples. And he actually specifies these European people. He lists them. I think there's 7 that he lists. And this is in his The Winning of the West, his 4-volume history. And he literally describes the American in these ethnic adjacent terms. And that's his definition of American, is someone who came here from Europe and created this new ethos, this new country out of raw land with grit, with struggle, with hardship, facing savages, he would call them. And that's what he meant by the American. That was his definition of the American. And so my definition of heritage American is those of us who want to belong to something deeper than ourselves in this individual moment, they can look back on Teddy Roosevelt's definition and say, that's my patrimony.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's also interesting, Brian and I have talked about this. Like you look at the early period, the founding of America, and then even all the way up till like 1950, you get really looking at demographic studies, census reports, that sort of thing. It's like 90% or more, and it's predominantly like British, right? So mostly British peoples. But then in the 60s, you have changes with Hart-Celler. And it's also interesting, I think maybe Kennedy was the one who coined the phrase, but a nation of immigrants with his book, pushed by the ADL. But it's really interesting because I grew up thinking we've always just been what I knew in like the 90s and the 00s, which was that, you have all sorts of different nations present on your shores. But this really wasn't the case. It's hard for a lot of Americans to comprehend that today. But as you look at that, first of all, what's wrong with the phrase that we're a nation of immigrants in the way that that was meant?
Yeah, so nation of immigrants has this idea that this is not our land and we don't actually belong to it. We're kind of like aliens ourselves, and our land, it's part of that guilt manipulation complex. So I would say we're not a nation of immigrants. We're a nation of pioneers and settlers, that America did not exist until European explorers built something out of what they found, which was chaos and pagan religions and warfare and bloodshed and slavery and all the things that like we're supposed to adopt as our own, original sins. That's actually what they found here. Yeah. And so they built this America out of that. They conquered it. They literally conquered it. And they came to face these dangers with bravery. And I think that it's okay to talk in terms of that. So we are a nation of settlers. And immigrants, see the difference between a settler and an immigrant is an immigrant comes into a country that already exists and he assimilates and he adjusts his way of life and his instincts to that culture. An invader is someone who comes in to conquer. A settler is someone who comes in to build something new. And so all of us, we are told daily by the media and by academic that we too are immigrants. And I say, no, we're actually Native Americans. We're the children and descendants of the settlers. We're not immigrants. There are some immigrants here, and so we're not like anti-immigration in some absolutist sense. But there is a difference between a settler and an immigrant, and I think we are a nation of settlers, and that nation was created by real men doing hard things, and it was created over the course of several hundred years. And immigration came after there was already a nation set up by the settlers.
Yeah, it seems to me like this is another one of those areas where the exception makes poor law, where, obviously you're not saying that American identity, that American citizenship, that essentially there's absolutely no room ever for an immigrant ever in any sense even if you thought today a really good policy would be a century-long moratorium on immigration, for example, you're still not saying there is no such thing as an immigrant who genuinely assimilates, join the mother culture. Well, you're not saying that, but it seems like when people bring that as an objection to even thinking through this American identity, heritage American identity question, it's almost like they're not recognizing that while that is true, it's also obviously true. It's almost like it's almost axiomatic that there is a very limited range or a very limited percentage to where a culture, maybe 100 million strong nation, could absorb some percentage of immigrants and more easily from a area that was more harmonious with its ethnic character and
that's
culture.
The controversial thing. But
it certainly can't absorb 40 million more as a 100 million person nation or 100 million or 200 million. Obviously, there's a boundary somewhere where it becomes conquest and the replacement destruction, it's the end of that original culture.
Yeah.
That seems obvious to me, but it also seems like the location of a lot of the controversy.
I think so. I mean, there's this universalist, particularist kind of dynamic at play here. Like Thomas Jefferson will write that we really do need more immigrants because we have, an entire continent that we have to conquer. Like we can't do that with just the people in the colonies. We need more people. but it's 2026 now, you know, like it's the 21st century now. And so you can't take this little phrase in a letter from 250 years ago and say, this is our absolute principle for all time. And if you doubt this, then you hate the founders.
Thomas Jefferson would just hit you with his musket.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, like I said, this is so funny, like to use the founders like that, as if like Thomas Jefferson was one of the more liberal founders. And like you look at his, like how would you deal with something like sodomy, right? And Thomas Jefferson, Enlightenment, deist, anti-Christian, his suggestion was castration. And so like you want to,
he's a super lib, you know.
Yeah, well,
he just wants to castrate the sodomites.
Well, yeah, because the death penalty was the standard at the time. But my point is that like these people selectively apply phrases. And so like it's what you said earlier. The left is really good at using things to hit you over the head with. And it's just dumb and it's low IQ and it actually is not an argument at all.
And they rely on people not understanding the difference between a contextualized statement from a founder, given the way that they used a word, even some of the universal language they wanted more people because they had a whole continent to settle. There was a lot of work to get done. Who they thought of as anyone, but also understanding what they would have taken as obvious. Like the idea, you noted it earlier, that any of the founders would have said, oh yeah, we could take some of the Barbary pirates and we could take, you know, some Nigerians and pretty much anybody. That'd be fine. That's what we need to help settle the continent.
It's funny how like the founders are simultaneously like misogynist, racist, like terrible people that you should never look up to. And also you have to believe every single
absolute ideal.
Yeah, exactly. Every single time. And so it's like, maybe there's a better way of thinking through this.
What if we actually thought through it?
Yes. What if we did? And so like immigration policy does change because the situations change. And that's part of politics is like, there's always unique threats. There's always unique opportunities and you need to adjust your policy in accordance with those. So by the time of the 1920s, you know, the United States was being flooded with people from Central Europe who are closer. They're part of Western civilization. So maybe over time they could assimilate better than, you know, someone from India or something like that over time. But Calvin Coolidge was recognizing the fact that even that was kind of drifting us away from our core culture. Yeah. And so he put on a moratorium and he recognized the fact that if you're going to, and this is his phrase again in his speech defending the 1920s immigration initiatives. He said, if we're going to preserve the American race, so we should talk about race in a second. Yeah. We're going to preserve the American race, then we need to select from immigrants who actually have a better chance of, you know, cooperating with that and becoming part of that.
Interesting. So I do want to talk about race, just to put it, you know, underline it a little bit and make sure people are following and that I'm hearing you correctly. It seems like your ideal conception of heritage American, while recognizing disagreement and that there's a range, would be something similar to Teddy Roosevelt's, the descendants of the people who settled America into the 19th century, but sometime in the 19th century, you move into now we're actually dealing more with immigration.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great, it's convenience, right? Like people want to get all rationalistic and what about this person? Here's his ethnic breakdown. Here's his percentages. Like that's not how politics works. That's not how culture or anything else. That has no part in these like serious conversations. We're dealing with generalities. We're dealing with archetypes, things of that sort. So I really do think the most useful conversation is, or the most useful position is to take the closing of the frontier. That's a really natural stopping point. It ends like right at the turn of the 20th century. And I think that's a great way to think about it. That's kind of my preference. Now, well, look, we have to be political realists here. And so we've come a long way from 1900 to 1960 when the Hart-Celler Act is passed. And basically what that does is it reverses the restrictions where there's all of these national caps on who can come from what country. And it basically just obliterates those. And so what that does is that brings in people who are not part of Western civilization. So like, for convenience, like it's totally fine to say, look, we're not going to take all of these Italians, we're not going to take all these other Central Europeans, and we're not going to just round them up either. We're going to be realists about what the situation is. And so things do change. And I think that it's better to think in terms of, okay, so what now can we do to preserve Western civilization? Who came from the West? Who came from the Christendom? Those are conversations that we can have. And so it does morph over time, and our realistic policy has to adopt to that. But I think Heritage American is best defined as being sourced before the closing of the frontier.
Okay. And then even within, I think obviously this is something like what you're saying, but even when you think about immigration, there are more or less harmonious cultures. So when you have 20th, post 2000, most of the Indians in America, I believe, came since the year 2000. I think that's demographically accurate. In terms of immigration, most people from India, I don't mean Native American, Chippewa, Cherokee.
Yeah.
Most of them came since the year 2000. Even that is a much different thing than some of the maybe less easily integratable European immigration over the world wars and in the 20th century that it took 2 world wars to integrate.
Yeah.
And to destroy ethnic ghettos of even European ethnic ghettos that are maintaining their own European heritage in ways that are contrary to the American identity. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's exactly fair. I mean, it's like we're dealing with, concentric circles. And so there is a core, and the core is the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That was the core of the founding generation, and it has broadened since then. But I think we can fairly say that those outside of the West have a harder time assimilating into Western heritage than those inside it. And so it's a concentric circle. And like you get someone who's like literally from England, like he's going to fit in best with the colonies.
Yeah.
You bring in someone from, the what we call the third world now, and he just like they wouldn't make sense, right? So there is a spectrum to it, and that's how politics is. It works in gray areas, and you can't have these absolutes, and that's how they try to trick you, right? And they try to catch you up with that. But no, we're dealing with archetypes and generalities. We're dealing with cultures, which is by definition a grouping of individuals.
And they will try to put in your mouth these absolutes.
Of course.
And then make your position absurd, or try to present your position as absurd. Where all of a sudden they're asking like, well, Andrew Isker, is he a heritage American? When did his family get here? Was it 1883? Well, that's after the cutoff. So, Andrew's on a boat. He's going back to Poland?
Scandinavia?
I'm just kidding. No, Andrew, you could.
Let me just say
I want you to put a picture of Andrew on the screen right now with the label Heritage American.
Well, I was just going to say he's working out really hard because he wants to fit in when he gets here in June.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
That's right. Okay.
I've noticed this other tendency, though, even among Christians. And I want to talk just a bit about this, and then we can deal with race as well, because they're connected. Yeah. I've noticed with a lot of Christians, they actually seem to be helping the left here because they try to muddy the waters here. So a big thing I hear is like, well, you can't even really know what your heritage is. And, there's been so much intermarriage and like, nobody knows anything.
Because we can't calculate it to the 10th decimal point.
Exactly.
Therefore, it's not a thing at all.
Correct.
Terrible argument.
So I just want to ask you about that. Why is that problematic? And then the kind of the follow-up, you've mentioned this, but sort of this problem of like a very ecclesiocentric way of thinking through like immigration and ethnicity, where we're thinking about like who can worship the true and living God. And like, that's not exactly the same question about politically who should be in your country.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point to have, because people get funny about this, because like they'll say things like, you're confusing the church and the state. Like whenever you want to Christian politics, like Stephen Wolfe will mention the Christian Prince, you're not supposed to cross the church and the state. But suddenly when you talk about like who we are as a nation, you're not allowed to draw those boundaries because we're all one in Christ.
Wait a second. I thought we weren't allowed to do a church and state. Now Galatians 3:28 is like our immigration policy.
Exactly.
As if that is what St. Paul was discussing in the letter to the Galatians.
Well, specifically, it's right there. Those in Christ. Like, is everybody in Christ? Like, are we universalists? No, of course not. Like, they wouldn't say that. But they get all flaky about it. And it's like, it's really obvious that there's a difference between the kingdom of God, those who are saved, those who are elect, which obviously transcends race and all of these national boundaries. Nevertheless,
it doesn't eradicate national boundaries.
No, it doesn't. But it does recognize that he can draw from all of these nations. And we are brothers and sisters in Christ together on equal terms. But that's not civil policy.
Most marketing doesn't fail because it's bad. It fails because it was never built with a purpose. A video gets made, a post gets published, a website gets updated, and crickets. There are no shortcuts in a world created for steady growth. The problem is that it was never engineered to move a buyer from interest to trust to action. The reality is, you have a product or service buyers want. We just need to get it in front of them. So what's the alternative? At Simply Whitchurch, we don't just do content, we design systems where ads answer questions, remove friction, and sell when the owner isn't in the room. Last year, we helped generate over $10 million in revenue for our partners, and we want to do the same for you. If you want marketing that just works, reach out today for a free strategy call. We'll show you exactly where momentum is lost and how to build on the right foundation.
Men, it's time to reclaim the strength you were made for. Introducing the Crusader Transformation, a 90-day barbell challenge with the limit of 5. We'll keep this small so you can build a brotherhood with 5 like-minded fathers who value strength as much as you do. Together, we'll forge competence, discipline, and resilience. If you sign up now, it's only $800, which is 25% off the regular price. You'll train with purpose, stay accountable, and receive personalized instruction. Join the Crusader Transformation. Train for strength, lead with purpose. Sign up at crusader.fitness.
I just preached a sermon called The Sin of Midwittery. That was the literal title. And it was about some of this stuff because our church has been trying to talk through these questions in men's book groups and lots of different contexts. It's in the conversation. We know the people under our pastoral care are trying to figure them out. And one thing they're trying to figure out is where is the boundary between the ecclesiastical and the political. So because that matters a lot. And in that sermon, I looked at a lot of those passages, and it's so easy when you just pay attention on the most basic level to what's happening in them and how we deal with them in any other category like sex, that there's neither male nor female. Well, okay, then based on the way that you deal with the racial elements of that or the ethnic elements, would you then also say like, yeah, to your 6-year-old daughter, go in the men's room or the girls' room, it doesn't even matter. There's neither male nor female in Christ. But you're not retarded. So people are able to make these distinctions pretty readily. And that I do think a lot of this is people pretending not to understand.
For sure.
Being offended and pretending not to understand things that they absolutely do understand what you're saying, but they're not trying to understand, they're trying to win.
Yeah.
Well, I think the other part, I'm working on a book on the Longhouse and feminization, but Ann Douglas makes this argument that as a lot of the founding of America was very Calvinistic and patriarchal. And she said the thing that eroded it with feminism was the sentimentalization of the faith. And so I think as you get less doctrine, you get more emotion, people stop being able to think clearly in a political way, right? And you could go back to the magisterial reformers and you're like, they thought very clearly about these things. But as you noted, like when Stephen Wolf's book came out, this was like the first time people had heard any of these concepts.
Yeah.
And so the knee jerk was from a place of like ecclesiocentric pietism that was like, well, you know, how does this all work together? So I think maybe that's one of the things we're trying to reestablish in rebuilding the West is also robust theology and particularly robust political theory.
We don't start with the question, whose feelings will this hurt? What would be the difficult emotional implications of this thing really being politically true? Because that would be really difficult for this people group that's here, or that people group that wants to be here, or this friend who is Indonesian and just got here in 2004. Like there's a lot of, and to act like those aren't actually difficult emotional questions is stupid. They are. That's a really hard question. I think about Christians who are even this crisis of identity. It's not just for heritage Americans seeing their nation being destroyed and their demographic replaced. It's also for immigrants who, through no choice of their own, many of them are here. And they got here because grandpa came here or dad came here and I was 8. And now I recognize that not in terms of stock, a part of this people. And yet I was raised in the cultural norms of this people. I am religiously Christian. I'm all these different things. We can, I think, walk and chew gum at the same time. Say, these are difficult questions, and let's not be flippant about how difficult they are. But at the same time, let's make sure that we're reasoning down to first principles, not on the basis of how those will make us feel, but what's true. And then we'll have the tools to figure out what to do.
There's an interesting phrase, the therapeutic state. Have you guys heard of this?
Yeah.
So Paul Gottfried uses this. This is like one of his primary interpretations of like the post-60s managerial state. And the therapeutic state kind of prioritizes things based on like how the groups are going to feel about the policy or the agenda. And so it's not even down to an individual level. Like, is this person going to be offended by this? But it's more like, is this group going to feel like they're part of our nation if we define things in this way? So like if we interpret history, if we have our children learning about it, like, so you've brought in millions of people and they have children and they're in school.
Yeah.
If the children learn that America was primarily set up by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, like they might go home and complain because, you know, they don't fit in, they don't belong here.
Yeah.
And so we need to adjust our understanding of history, our understanding of identity in order to prioritize the demands of the therapeutic state. I think that's when he says therapeutic state, it's not literally the state, but it's like the therapeutic way of being that characterizes modern America. And so I really like that phrase. It's very therapeutic. It's not necessarily individually emotional, but definitely you can't get down to the facts and you can't speak objectively about anything because it really does make people feel like they don't belong. And those words like belonging and safety and fitting in and being able to set your own reality, that's all part of the fruit of the therapeutic state.
It's the transgender movement.
It's the transgender
It's the
movement.
exact playbook applied to every single distinction, hierarchy, issue of variegation in God's world, every aspect of created order. The left, which is Satan, attacks it, very profitably in our day in modernity through that exact doorway. They take that playbook, they apply it to the next thing, destroy it, deracinate it, homogenize it, conquer it, gain power in it, use that same power then to take the next step and go one more rung up the hierarchy of being. And you notice that all of it really does relate to being. It relates to who a person is. What is a man? What is a woman? What does it mean to be, now we're at, what does it mean to be in your nationality and your race? What is it? It's all an attack on creation. It's an attack on God's authority in creation.
Well, a lot of that too just comes back to the feminization of politics, even with the therapeutic. I mean, everything you described is basically like what happens under feminization, where truth takes a backseat to feelings. Even as you look at the immigration issue, who are the loudest, most outspoken, obnoxious people, obstructing ICE officers? It's like liberal white women.
Oh yeah, they're the front line. They are the left silliest soldiers.
Yeah. I hope that Phil Williams is watching this because one of the phrases that got printed on yard signs in our town where we live, we were taking part in this project in Tennessee. And so we come in and these big scary podcasters are coming in, like what have they said? One of the things that I said that was, very, very bad was that I said that one of our biggest problems was college educated white women.
It is.
And so all like the yard signs and in front of restaurants, we stand with college educated white women,
Well, they've actually done articles on this with like the single woke
Yes.
female. Like it is, I think outside of the black voting bloc, single woke women, it's like the second largest voting bloc.
College
and they're
educated.
like
College educated. Yes.
And they're like wildly liberal.
Blacks overall vote much more liberal, so do Jews overall than women overall. Women are only in the 60s in terms of the percentile voting left. But that's when you say that's kind of a low number because upwards of 90% of blacks vote left, upwards of high 70% of Jews vote left. But when you get to the college educated white woman, that's when you explode up. They're the ones pushing that overall number into the 60s. Because if you just looked at all of the rest of women in America, they would be conservative. I'm pretty sure they would actually be.
Well, particularly if you're like married, that has a huge
children.
Yeah, married with children. That has a huge
in wedlock. Like there's many things you could put in. One of them would just be men. If men only voted. Phil, can I call you Phil? I only think men should vote, and not even all of those. Thank you, Phil. Yeah. I really appreciate your coverage of these important issues.
It is really interesting because we're talking about like part of this is how do you have these conversations? And, you know, I mean, this has been going on in politics for a long time. The left was very good at this. This is why like the DNC, there would always be like these emotional videos of, you know, a woman who she couldn't, you know, afford healthcare. And so we need Obamacare. And it's this weepy, sad thing. And that's become political discourse. So my question is, then how do we have this conversation in the midst of that? That has to be pretty rationalistic. We have to use things like logic and just like raw politics, like look at the data and make decisions. How do we do that?
I think one of the things that's going to happen is the product of the left's way of life and the way that they've set everything up is actually just despair and chaos. And so I think as those things take their natural way of decline, we're going to find that women who need help, because they actually do need help, because men and women were created for each other, what's going to happen is there's going to be a coming back of this natural, I want to say aristocracy, because that's like the historic term, but I don't mean that in any, like, I'm not like special or anything, but it's going to take this natural phenomenon of people who are rejecting the decline and they're looking back at older ways of doing things. And so I think that what's waiting for the left-wing agenda and the path that we've been on for the last 100 years of the West is really just a lot of turmoil and a lot of pain and a lot of despair. And so the people that are going to have hope and the people that are going to be able to fight back and the people that are going to articulate their positions with authority and they're going to be looked up to are those of us who are adhering to the created order. And so I think it's going to be this like natural connection. I don't think we have to walk in and convince a bunch of bureaucrats to accept our way of doing things. I think that they're going to slowly decay. And I think we're going to be rebuilding at the same time as they're decaying, and that there's going to be this natural correction, because that's how history works, is that you abandon the created order, you abandon the way that God intended it, and the fruit of that is just poisonous, and you're going to fall off the cliff. And so I'm not even worried about winning the debate with the hysterics. What I'm worried about, what I focus on, is appealing to the men who are looking for something different, a different way of life. And if you've noticed recently, for the first time in a long time, it's men that are leading the charge back to church, and the women are following them. And I think that is a sign of growth. It's a sign of springtime. And these are the healthy trends.
Yeah, we're seeing the thaw, where the witch's spell breaks, because it can only hold for so long. You can only, and I don't mean that in a rose-colored glasses way. You can absolutely destroy a nation or a civilization irrevocably. It can be gone forever. You could destroy America. This could historically take place. America could completely die. At least any America worth existing, could completely die and go away. But over the long view of history, my view is that you can't say that 2 + 2 = purple forever. Exactly. And have it work. Because these are issues of nature. They're not just issues of religious conversion, which they are those too, and that deeply matters. It's of highest importance. But they're also issues of nature.
Well, they're social renewal, right? Like that's what's happening. It's not just like individual hearts are being converted, but nations can be made anew. And I think that's kind of the level we're supposed to be speaking at.
I also think, CJ, to your point, as people experience sort of the decline and the degeneracy at a firsthand level. So I've seen in Utah, even as we've had more and more flood of immigrants, thanks to Spencer Cox, who was championing the Biden policies.
And some of the worst Venezuelan gang members, violent crime.
Yeah, but all it takes is like soccer moms who are like, there was a triple homicide at the apartment complex across from where my kids go to school. I don't like this.
And they could have been an ad for liberalism 5 years before this. But then they experience it. We've talked to people like this in Utah that are like, I was kind of ambivalent. And then the apartment complex that 8 years ago when we moved in was majority, we're in Utah, so it was majority white. It was probably majority Mormon, even maybe lower middle income Mormons. And it was societally possible to live there in a peaceful way. Even if you didn't agree, like these are Mormons, they don't even share your religious identity. But then it's been a 5 to 10 year period in Utah where Spencer Cox and his ilk has brought in, we're not enforcing immigration law. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of immigrants
you can't ignore it
out of the West, from not in the West.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, these complete normies who would not politically have any of the terminology that we've used in this episode at all of a sudden they're saying, and they kind of look left and they look right when you bring it up. And then they go, you know what? Like, I think the immigrants are the problem.
Well, and they'll be like, yeah, I had to move. It wasn't a safe neighborhood.
We had to leave. We had to leave this place that was our place before that.
I think that eventually the therapeutic state of mind is going to capitulate to the natural order. And I think that's what happens.
May the Lord speed it.
Yeah. I want to ask, while we still have you on the race thing, tee up for that. Walk me through it. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think that there's the way I think about here's the thing. There are different ways of conceiving what it means to be an American. So like I distinguish between like the genetic absolutists, who I consider materialists. The definition of a human being is very physical. It's material. It's the genes in your body. And I don't think we have to go down that path to defend Heritage America or even ethnic America, because I believe in an ontology that unites soul and body together. And so therefore a people can be this combination of their experiences. I think that they've inherited spiritual factors from their parents, and part of our way of being, our culture, our instincts, our cultural and social predilections are actually inherited, and those are soulful or spiritual elements too. And so I think when we speak in terms of race, we need to get out of the materialist trap, because this is like the Joel Berries, like they always say, oh, you're a Darwinist, right? Because you believe in race. And it's like, actually, I have a pre-Darwinian conception of race. And the pre-Darwinian conception of race is actually more complex than just material genetics. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would say is that when you look back at the history of the meaning of race, there's actually a unity and a plurality to it. And so in one sense, the unity of it is that all mankind is descended from Adam. We are one race in that sense. But there's also a plurality to it. Classical Christian authors have talked about the fact that there's three great races. There's the descendants of Noah's children, of Noah's sons. And so in that sense, there's a little bit of plurality. But as you go on, you can find that there's more plurality. Mm-hmm. So they talked about in the Middle Ages that you are of the race of Charlemagne. Mm-hmm. And you're of the race of some African patriarch. And so race doesn't have to be this Darwinian materialist genetic thing. It actually just means commonality of ancestors. That's what it means.
My Bible, and I was just reading Romans 9 for family worship last night to my children. And Paul, in the ESV, the translation I'm reading from, it just says Paul talks about the race of the Israelites. Mm-hmm. And the ESV uses that word race to translate that Greek term that because those concepts were antecedent to Darwinism, like greatly antecedent to Darwinism. We've talked about it before. These are words that entered the English language in the 1500s.
Right.
So Darwin, 1860s, right? Mm-hmm. The origin of the species. It's, again, people are pretending like they don't understand something to get offended a lot of the time.
Well, that's the funniest thing is like they're forcing us into their Darwinian framework of definitions. Like I'm the one that's a pre-Darwinist. Like,
hang on.
Like race has been talked about and discussed in the unity and plurality, way of thinking forever. Like it's part of the English language.
Yeah.
Like look at any dictionary from the 17th century, Samuel Johnson's famous English dictionary, which preceded Webster's. He talked about the fact that race, and he uses Christian definitions, right? Because he's part of Christian England.
Yeah.
And so race could sometimes mean the unity of all of mankind,
right? Because
we're all descended from Adam. Yes. Or it could mean the fact that we have different direct ancestors that other people don't share.
Yeah.
I do not come from the line of Charlemagne. I am not French. But I do come from a line of, Swedish and Germans. And so that's you could call it race if you want. But like that's how it's a very informal. And so people get all caught up in it and they say, you must be a proponent of like, Nazi Germany because you use the R word.
They only have one political description.
It's like,
they have one reference.
I know.
They're like us in this sense because Christians, evangelical Protestant Christians, we only have one illustration for everything and it's Lord of the Rings. And they just have one political illustration. And it's
Sometimes
always
Narnia.
Nazi.
Sometimes Narnia.
Yeah, we have two. Okay. They have, Nazism and Hitler. That's there too.
That's it.
You know?
That's there too,
So, I mean, it's the same picture. Corporate wants you to show the difference. But it's so absurd because there are really, it's a rich discussion that people have been having before Darwin, before Hart-Celler, before it was an American question. It's just a normal human question.
Yeah.
And when you don't push it all the way to the absolute, which almost nobody does actually in the wild, I don't know that I've met a genetic determinist. I don't know that I've met this, race essentialist. I don't know that I've actually met people, and I'm sure they exist somewhere, but they generally aren't real people. They're generally caricatures that are exaggerated universals that are used to attempt to make absurd somebody's particulars that they're actually...
Right. So if we could, let's apply this to the Heritage American.
Yeah.
So with that said, the plurality unity, that's how we can interpret things like Roosevelt and Coolidge's definition of the American race. Like, why did they use that phrase? Because they saw what was happening was this creation of something new in world history, not a post-European in the sense that like they're not growing up in Europe, but this new civilization that was taking place that was the product of the combination of these various ethnic types on the European continent were coming to America and forming their own culture, their own complex of ideas are part of that. Propositions actually are part of that. They come out of a given people. But there is an American race. We can say of ourselves that we are our own people, like the American people. I'm not like this is the context of Roosevelt's war on the hyphen, right? When he said that there's no hyphenated Americans, we're all just American. What he was saying was that an ethnogenesis had taken place and that we look at ourselves and we say, I don't see myself as a German. I see myself as American.
Yeah.
And it's because my parents completely integrated themselves into the making of a new people.
Yeah.
And so that's what was happening in the 19th century. So the only difference is between us and the British ethnicity or the German ethnicity. The only difference is that we're more recent. We're more recently generated. That's the difference.
I mean, Saxons, Britons and Saxons, and then, the Frankish peoples. We're talking about something that has happened countless times in history.
Yeah.
And one thing that it means that people, I think, struggle with is that all the way up and all the way down, when you're talking about something that can be both universal, we're all descended from Adam. There wasn't some line of hominids that descended from the Neanderthals that mixed with this. Okay, no. We're not that. We're Christians. We're all descended from Adam. But then also the same term can be used in different contexts to refer to more particular things. By definition, and those things they are both in stasis and not in stasis. In history, that always leads to fuzzy edges and challenging definitions sometimes. So like when was a British person when did an Anglo-Saxon become an Anglo-Saxon and not whatever peoples the Anglo-Saxons came from, right? The Angles and the Saxons. I'm assuming they were very, pointy people on the Angles.
Well, it's like the abortion debate, right? Like, so people will say things like, the reason, we have to have abortion because what if this 12-year-old was raped and she had this baby? Like, that's their example.
Yes.
And it's like 0.0001, whereas like the vast majority of abortions are literally just people that don't want a baby.
I had a baby. I killed my baby because I didn't want the baby.
That's the majority of abortions.
But you're arguing from this rare
That's
exception.
exactly how they do. So you can't have a heritage American. You can't consider yourself American because you can't define the date and the month when your parents like stopped being German and started becoming American. I win.
Yeah.
And that's how the left works.
What if it's a 12-year-old that was raped with an ectopic pregnancy and also they have cancer and need chemotherapy though?
Yeah, they get down to the nitty gritty, and it's
so. One of the things I want to ask before we run out of time, because I think this is where we've talked about this pastorally. It's a real challenge. People want to start with the what about.
Oh yeah.
What about this situation? But it is important to talk about application. So in applying these principles, if all those things are true about Heritage America, people will inevitably ask, what are you actually advocating for?
Yeah.
And so where do you start with that discussion?
Well, I would first say that one of the purposes of this is that we should have these conversations even if there was no immigration crisis. If you look at the way people talked about their own history in the 19th century, they wanted their children to understand where they came from. So this conversation actually is independent of the immigration crisis. Your children should know where they came from. That is a good that God created.
Should know who your forefathers are.
We should be engaging in routine hagiography of our people. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, we're great. You come from a great people.
Yeah.
And then you exaggerate the heck out of it because it's inspiration. That's part of the purpose of identity.
Of course
is inspiration to virtue.
Yeah. So that's the first thing I would say is like, well, we should be talking about this all the time anyway. Who are we? That's awesome. God has blessed us to have an inheritance, a patrimony.
Yeah.
Those are good things. That's the first thing. The second thing is it should bear into the conversation about what is actually happening in 2026. There are still forces at play that want there to be tens of millions. Some of the reasons include, like Democrat power plays. Some of them include like cheaper wage labor. All those things play into it. So we could apply this to those conversations. But then it's like, if America is supposed to stand for something, if we're supposed to be something, if we're supposed to honor those that set up this wonderful nation, then what do we need to do to preserve it? And sometimes, like Rupert Lau, I think that's his name in Britain, said, it's going to take a lot of pain to restore what has been gambled away, basically. And so I have that on my mind as well. What is it going to take to actually restore America and American heritage? Because yes, we love Christendom, and yes, we love our European heritage, but specifically, I am an American.
Right.
And that is even more unique. It's even more narrow than my, European ancestry. That is something that I feel desperately needs to be passed on to a generation who has never really experienced the America that I did in the 90s, and certainly not the America that my father did when he grew up in the 70s. So I think that restoration requires these hard conversations. And so then we have to talk about, okay, stopping immigration, that's great. Well, what about all of these people that came in under really shady circumstances, like the temporary protected stuff? Those are legal. So we need to go back and we say, is this bolstering the restoration of American culture or not? And for decades, people like Pat Buchanan have said, if we don't do something now, he's speaking in 1992, if we don't do something now, our children or our grandchildren will have to do very difficult things. They will have to make difficult political decisions. And we did not heed that advice. And so now it's our turn to make the difficult decisions.
Yeah. And if no one will make the difficult decisions, then the reality is you just conquered.
Yeah.
And the reality is that people goes away.
Correct.
Historically speaking, that people will go away. It will be a couple chapters in a history book in 200 years. Well, there once was this people that was like this, and you can see remnants of them, and it'll be like the people in they're descended from the Incans, and you can find this little group of them here, and they once ruled this vast land and did all these. Some of them really, really bad in that case. Hopefully, ours would be better, but it will still be a history book chapter and not a living thing anymore.
Correct. Yeah.
So would that be the practical first step, is just going back, I don't know, even like the last 20 years and like deporting people?
Remigration.
Whatever you want to call it.
Yes. I am a firm believer that remigration is it's the task that we have been burdened with because we didn't listen to our fathers in the 80s and 90s. So we talk about Hart-Celler and how bad that was because it changed the how many people were coming in from the third world and so forth. But actually in the 80s, we made even worse decisions. And in the 80s, we made decisions like the Refugee Acts, which basically allowed people to come in. If one person was born here, he could bring his entire family here, as well. So all of these things actually like multiplied the problem. And so, we have to go back. I mean, like it's like either we exist or we don't, and those are the options. And like in that, if given those menu items, I would choose exist.
Do you think currently the political will exist to do it?
Not yet. No, not yet.
And what will that take?
I think it'll take a lot of, like in England, one of the reasons that he's having Rupert Lau, the Restore Britain, one of the reasons I like the way he's doing it is because he's mobilizing all of these women, these moms that no longer feel safe going to the park at all.
Smart.
And so, he's mobilizing all of them. And so like, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take people saying, look, I can't even go outside. Like my husband's away on a trip. I can't even go to the park right now because I don't feel safe. I think it's going to take, mobilizing those types of forces because the politicians and the leaders are so aloof. They have no idea what's going on, nor do they care. They get fat checks to, turn their head the other way and other things. But I think that that's what it's going to take. It's going to take real people saying enough is enough and you can't be ignored forever.
So pain.
Deep pain. So deep pain. I mean, you have to confront the situation honestly.
Yeah.
And look, being honest with ourselves as a people has always been a very hard thing for the human race.
Yeah.
It's hard to be honest with our sins, and we've inherited the sins of our fathers.
And we need a renewal of masculinity for sure, to see any of that happen.
Well, I even think of it.
See that happen to your women and say, no.
I've been thinking a lot about this, going back and listening to the interview. I think it was Face the Nation with JD Vance. And they're having the immigration discussion. Margaret, I forget her last name. But JD Vance's response to her, she was like, yeah, but a lot of them are okay. And yeah, they might be killing people. And he just said, he's like, I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want them in my country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think more men are just going to have a spine like that and say, no, we have to end this.
It was a conversation that Eric and I had not long ago with a family, and they were talking about some of these issues where the wife had been rankled by something we said. And we were talking about the issue of race, and it was specifically a crime statistic, some issue of crime statistics we had brought up. You mentioned some people talk about crime statistics.
Yes.
Welcome to the King's Hall podcast. Making self-ruled men who rule well and talk about crime statistics. So we had that conversation, and specifically, I believe the wife was rankled or just saying like, "What? This seems so mean. Why would you say that?"
She said you talked about not living in like minority or
people are trying to make enough money to live far enough away from minorities. And that seemed to really rankle me. And the husband, and part of it was that they were minorities. So they were talking about that. And the husband at one point reached over and kind of like touched his wife's arm. And he was like, well, honey, like I didn't say it that way, but that's why I made enough money to buy a house where we could live far enough away from minorities. And he's like, it was in my calculation because he had grown up in that culture and experienced even participating in it as a high, the type of young man that would have ended up in prison without the intervention of a godly pastor who stepped in and like gave him some hard love. And so now he's a functional, loves his wife, works hard. And he said, well, hang on, there was a reality that she wasn't even aware of.
Yeah.
That he had been caring for his family surrounding some of the realpolitik of these things. That is actually going to become more and more of a luxury.
Yeah.
As it becomes so overt that the wives and the daughters and
I think especially as you're looking at what's happening with home prices, it's much harder now simply just to move. You can't just do that.
No, a lot of people are locked into their 3% interest rate, and to move would mean that their mortgage goes from $1,100 a month to $4,300 a month. It's not a luxury they have. You can't flee forever. That's a principle that I think will, at some point, will lead to either people, it might be too late, but attempting to wake up when they realize there's actually nowhere else I can go.
Yeah. And like you said, it's going to take, men that are able to make decisions. And to be honest, as Christians, we have a hard time with the P word, and the P word is power. And you have to you have to exercise power, the power of the state. And that's okay because again, it's been blessed by God. It's been sanctioned by God. Power, people, you just want power. It's like, well, power is a tool that God gave men to wield in defense of those that they love, right? So we're literally mobilizing a God-sanctioned tool, which is the sword, which is power, in order to defend and protect and preserve and promote the existence of those individuals that we love, but also the cultures and the heritages and the nations that we love.
Orderly society. It's funny because the person who's making that argument, they themselves are attempting to gain power over you with the words.
For sure.
When they say, well, you're just trying to gain power, they're actually leveraging the power of their rhetoric to try to gain power over you and manipulate you into saying something different and believing something different. Power is inescapable. I mean, it's obviously an inescapable concept.
Yeah.
Someone is going to have it. And even the people who are saying, well, power is the one ring of Sauron, they're trying to gain power over you with their really bad interpretation of Tolkien. See, I just proved that we only have one illustration.
Who was a monarchist.
Yeah. Who was a monarchist. Yeah, actually, like Tolkien would have looked at a lib today and said, you know that I'm like a Latin mass monarchist Roman Catholic, right?
Yes,
like,
that's right. It's funny because as you were talking about that, I was looking up a Tolkien quote.
I knew it.
But
there's only one illustration.
So hopefully this ties together. But I think last year at the conference, one of the things that really did it for me, we're talking about how do you change people's minds on this. It was actually Stephen Wolf's talk on home.
Yep.
And man, there was not a dry eye in the house. Like it was so moving thinking about not only what you hate and what's bad, but more importantly, what you love. So this is from the Two Towers. This is Faramir. And he said, I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend. And I think if you're going to win on the Heritage America thing, there's got to be this ethos and pathos of we love our people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We love the people in Ogden. You love the people in Tennessee. And all the little features of life together.
All their quirks.
All the quirks, the beautiful dresses, the way the ladies are when they're adorned in glory, all of those things.
How they all lose their car keys.
That's right.
Constantly.
That's right.
We love the way they are.
But I think you have to cultivate that love.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even more than you cultivate a hatred for.
This is why, like I mentioned, like Johnny Appleseed before, like you could sit your child down and like, here's 15 facts about America.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or you could tell them about John Henry and Paul Bunyan and Johnny Appleseed, and you create that mythos in their mind and you get their imagination going. You're planting seeds that will never leave them. When they are faced with a decision about whether to save their people or to allow their liquidation, the Johnny Appleseeds deep in their mind will have them say, I want America to be preserved because this is what my father taught me. And I think the stories, the myths, the exaggerations, that's what makes a people.
Yeah. It's why we do Brutal American. So there's the Brutal American podcast, which is rebranded from a much better name.
The Hard Men
podcast.
I don't know why
which doesn't sound homoerotic at all. Now it's the Brutal American podcast. But if you just go follow Brutal American on Instagram, you'll see it. I mean, it's exploded from like a couple thousand followers. It's well over 20,000 in like 2 weeks now. Mm-hmm. All it is a vibe channel of American pathos and ethos. Yeah. That's the whole thing. Yeah. It's one acoustic guitar lick every single time. I'm Fine, I think is the title of it. Yeah. Don't even know who made it. Over pictures of brutal Americans doing brutal American stuff.
In response to Ben Shapiro, vibes don't care about your facts. I mean, that's just...
that's right. You need both.
Can't stop the vibe.
The facts order the vibe that we create, but then we need to not fear the vibe. Make the vibe. And this is so... Like, people make fun of us in Ogden quite a bit for having a vibe. Like we have a vibe, we develop a vibe. There are aspects of this vibe that didn't exist 4 years ago. And we make fun of ourselves for it all the time. Like most of us wear cowboy boots now and like have Tacovas, rewards points and stuff like that. And they'll make fun of it. And we make fun of ourselves too, because there's an element of LARPing your way to something better. Yeah. But at the same time, to hell with it. Like we're going to LARP.
Yeah.
We're going to LARP. Like we're going to direct it with reason. Yeah. To something worth LARPing into existence, but like then LARP it into existence.
It's like that phrase, I think it's Will Tanner. It's one of those guys on the online where he says, become who you are.
Yes.
Like you have to train yourself to become who you really are. So like that's LARPing.
Yeah, just because I grew up at Northridge High School in Mormon Country, Utah, and there was very little that to me was worth like shaping a Christian man of the West. Well, of course, then I'm going to reach for other things. And we're going to develop our own particular Western Rocky Mountain, Utah, Christendom. It will anachronistically involve aspects of the Crusades because there are no rules. We can do whatever we want. But the goal is that we're creating, it's actually a real historically rooted thing that's also not historically rooted in the sense that there's always hagiography. There's always... exaggeration.
This is why I use the phrase heritage American. Like people say, well, why don't you just use white American? Well, heritage American actually reminds you of something like deeper than just like the race,
right?
As the way that we're taught to understand it. It pulls into the equation all of the myths and legends and all of those things.
Yes.
That's what heritage is. And it's something that transcends just biology, you know?
Yeah, like King Alfred is our logo at New Christendom Press, not just because there was a cool picture of King Alfred, but because his story is a story that's deeply needful for our time. Mm-hmm. The task of our time is very much like the task of Alfred's time. Praise God with less bloodshed right now. I'm thankful for that genuinely, and I'm not an accelerationist. I don't want civil war. I don't want hot war to break out so that we can get back quickly. I don't want that at all. But yet you can draw on things because that is lawfully mine.
Yeah.
That's a part of my tradition and my Western heritage as a Western Christian. That belongs to me. I don't have to be perfectly to the 10th decimal point, be able to show that every aspect is genetically mine.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the mistake I think some people make is they're too scared of arguing in generalities.
Yeah.
And they want to get all the way down to treat some of these things like a deductive argument that has to be valid and sound instead of an inductive argument or an argument from probability. And it's about a generally true thing. There's going to be some fuzzy edges, but let's argue from the middle and let's aim for the glory of the central features of that civilization and people that we came from.
Yeah, I also think this is one reason I like the Heritage America aspect. I mean, there's all sorts of cool things to read about, Central European or Spanish history, the great stuff. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not Spanish. No. And I'm not Roman Catholic.
You're not.
And so like you can learn a lot from Franco, and like that's really cool.
I don't see color, so I didn't actually know that until.
Oh, well, I'm telling you.
Oh, okay.
So now you know.
Gotcha.
But I look at those things and I think, well, wait a minute. We have great American heroes.
Yeah, we do.
I was just recently reading this kind of the stories of like John Hancock and all the things he did to sacrifice for the war effort. And I was thinking, I'm sure he had his faults, but also a great man.
Yeah.
And these are our fathers.
Yeah.
And we can love that and we can be inspired to greatness ourselves from our own heritage.
Dude, I'm writing a book on how to love your wife. And so, of course, Benedict Arnold gets like booed in his step for a whole half a chapter.
Benedict Arnold. Yeah,
like,
that's awesome.
Dude, what a villain.
I'm writing a book too.
Are you? Really? I want to hear about this actually.
Yeah.
It's actually about Heritage America.
Really?
Who are you writing it with, CJ?
I'm writing it. Who am I publishing it with?
Yeah.
Who are you writing it with? Who are you publishing it with?
Hey, what's going on here?
What I'm saying is this is now a hostile takeover book pitch.
No, that's exciting.
You're like, don't leave the room until the book's done.
Yeah, tell us more about it.
Well, it's this conversation, but like described historically. I get into details on the difficult, fuzzy conversations, but it's also a celebration of who we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that's really what I want it to be. Who we are as a people, who we are as a civilization, who we are as a derivative of Christendom. And I think that's kind of what I want to get into. I want to get into the making of America, describe the American ethos in a way that makes us say, yeah, that's me. And that's what I want. And that's what the purpose of the book is. And it's going to be that. So
I'm excited.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Do we have you're basically done with it.
More or less.
I can't wait to publish it. So yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, I've been working hard on it.
Man, that is phenomenal.
So many good books in the pipeline.
Seriously though, because a lot of books or a lot of the conversation, it does one of the two things kind of well. I really want to do both. I want to have that. We are Americans, and that is the greatest people to ever live. And I have no problem saying that, and I believe it with all my heart. And I actually want other people to feel that same way
about their own.
If I'm I lived in England for 3 years in the 90s. I'm not British. I'm American, but I think of my friends there, and I would want them to absolutely feel the exact same way about England. Mm-hmm. And I would want them to say, "Our Queen, Mog's your president." And at the time, actually, they were totally right. Elizabeth was way better than Bill Clinton.
Oh yeah,
my dream actually the whole time I lived there was to have tea with the Queen, because I just thought that was like a pretty achievable goal.
Yeah,
as a second grader, I thought that was pretty realistic. It actually wasn't.
It's not realistic.
No.
Awesome. Well, CJ, we appreciate having you. Obviously, encourage people to check out Contramundum. Yep. You've got a podcast with the one and only Andrew Isker.
Yes.
And I think you're on it sometimes.
I am, yeah. I've been, my face is.
Yeah. My face is.
You're doing some other stuff right now too, right? Where you do some interviews and things like that?
Yeah, so we've kind of changed the show and we're trying to up the game a little bit. So he actually does the live show by himself now, which is great because he can monologue, he can get out of his system, and I can do my emails, but not on camera, which is great.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, so he's doing the lives. We do our every other week flagship show, which is now pre-produced. So it's a lot better quality. And then I'm doing a once every week interview, deep dive interview. So I've done Will Tanner on Rhodesia.
Yeah, Will's great. We had him on our show. Oh,
he's a smart guy.
What is I love the tagline. I stole it from him. I'm sure he stole it from somewhere else, but tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the cultivation of fire.
Yes.
Oh, so good. Rhodesia.
It was great. So like that's the kind of stuff that I'm doing. So at Contra Mordor on X, Contra Mordor on X is my handle, and that's where you can find me.
Great handle. We only have one reference.
Yes, we only have one.
We only have one reference.
That's awesome.
Thanks for giving us your time, CJ. That was really good, and it was great to be able to have the guy, I'm now claiming it, who both coined and popularized the term Heritage American.
You can just write your own history.
Yeah, because like the ththing is, the AI, it just cites whatever's on the internet. So if someone asks Grok now from the transcript of this episode, that's what they're going to do. It was
CJay Engel.
So that's canon now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you to all of our listeners. We'll catch you in the next episode.